Hello, welcome to Image Bearers. My name is Otoma Edje. I'm very excited to have on the program today Dr. Douglas Jacoby, who's actually in Edinburgh. So that's far away, but he has definitely a nice background behind him. And we're going to get into his travels and his life through this time. Also have joining the program today, Gary Knutson, who is we're connected in a way through Johannesburg, and he'll share some more things even through the program. So definitely those of you who appreciate this program, please click like and consider subscribing to the program. We're going to go ahead and have Gary start us out. Thank you.
All right, thank you very much. So Douglas, welcome. It's great to see you. I guess
great to see you.
With a basic question, which is, can you please share about how you became a Christian?
I share about that all the time. And as you know, it's a story that involves you and another fellow in my, you took my, he was on the second floor, Douglas Arthur. You took him door knocking. I was living on the first floor. And that was my first invitation. And 7 weeks later, I became a Christian. You studied with me and you baptized me. Back then, we only really did one study a week. So maybe I could have been faster, but in a way, I probably had a lot to work through, but I'm eternally grateful. And that was just really a few weeks after I turned 18. It seems like I was so young.
Yeah, I remember it well. And it was a great and exciting time. That was at Duke University back in, for you, 1977, right?
77.
So the next question is, I'm sorry, Vicki couldn't be with us today, but how did you meet Vicki and get married?
Well, after Duke, I moved to Boston because it was a very exciting and happening scene. And the first mission team sent out from Boston was to London. And I was honored to be part of that. So that was in 82. And Vicki was baptized in early 83. So she was one of the first university students to make it. She was at that time in her final year of university. I guess technically we met after a women's basketball game, Wembley Arena, and she was baptized the next day. So I wanted to ask her out, but she was a young Christian, so I waited another 5 days before I asked her out.
Very kind of you, yes. So another question is, of course, we all know that you've lived in many different places around the world. Could you tell us where you've lived and a little bit about the work that you've done?
Right. Well, I mentioned going on the London mission team. At that time, I was working for the University of London, and I was a part-time student at the University of London, which was great. Went on staff in 1983. So we had a chance to work on staff in London and Birmingham, which is a couple hours north. We in Sydney, Australia. We moved to Sweden for a few years. We moved to the United States, moved back to the UK, back to the US, back to Australia for a little while, back to the US. So I think, we've moved a lot, 22 times. But in the last 15 years, I think just a couple of moves. So we're getting stable now.
Yes.
And work, so it was church work, but in 03, I became an independent minister after 20 years on staff, and Vicki also. Independent, and we do live in Scotland now. We've been here since the autumn.
So that was kind of a lead into one of our next questions, which is you did spend about 20 years in the ministry, and then you became an independent minister, consultant. I guess the question is, what is it that inspired each of you to go into the ministry or to go independent there?
Well, I wouldn't simply be telling my own story, but for many of us, I think you too, Gary, we very much admired the men, the women who helped us to become Christians. And in this early phase of what we call the movement, this will be the Crossroads phase, which preceded the Boston phase, which preceded the ICOC phase. But certainly in the Crossroads phase, many of our role models were campus ministers, and we really respected them tremendously. I was afraid to say that I would love to do that in my first couple of years because I was awkward, as you know, and it took a while, and I did eventually become a campus minister, but that was years later. But I think just admiring people who loved the Lord and had an impact. It was very inspiring. And it was kind of assumed if you could do that, maybe you should do that. Now, biblically, I don't think it's for everybody. The ministry is supposed to be based on gifts. Most gifted people cannot go on staff. There's not enough money for them. And I'm not sure it's even right. Nevertheless, I don't regret all those years. But I went on because I was inspired by others and there was a need, and especially deeply believed in reaching university students.
And when you did kind of branch out on your own, what were some of your thoughts? I mean, did you ever imagine that you would end up, doing all the different things that you did?
Really, I had no idea what to expect. When we were living on the way on the other side of the world, and we had to decide in 2003 what country do we move to, because there was simply no money to keep supporting us. And we thought we could come to the UK because in Great Britain we have a lot of family. Mm-hmm. We could go to the US, but it's easier to make money there. So my plan was, if nothing materializes, I'll become a Latin and Greek teacher, because those are two languages I've kept alive, although they're dead languages technically. But there were needs, and the crazy thing is most of the stuff I ended up doing pretty quickly was exactly what I was doing before, except not so many leaders meetings and very few staff meetings. So no, I had certainly no idea how this would turn out. But there've been even more opportunities now, leading tours, debating prominent people, and I don't know. I feel like I'm spoiled. We've had such an adventure, hard times, good times, but it's been real adventure.
I can't really keep track. About how many languages would you say that you speak?
Well, I work with a few of the ancient ones, and a couple of modern ones I'm decent at, and there are a few more modern languages I can read, but it would be a very limited conversation. But I've always loved, as a little kid, I've loved mathematics and symbols and codes, even the way music is written. So it's kind of mechanical. I would be a total failure if I had to do French, but if it's something concise, like German, I think I could actually do okay.
Yeah, I remember as a young Christian, you were sitting next to me and you would take notes in some kind of hieroglyphic shorthand that nobody could read except you. And we just—
That was the idea. Yeah, I made up like my own shorthand.
Yes, you did.
Yeah, you remember that. But I developed it, and eventually I was able to, when I first moved to London, I used that for dictation. My boss would dictate, that was my shorthand, and made some money out of it.
And nobody else could read it.
That's right.
Okay. So this is a difficult one because I know you've been so many places and done so many things, but what are some of your more memorable moments in the ministry?
Wow. There are so many, Gary.
Mm-hmm. Well, you just have to pick a couple of them, because
yes, I mean, I feel spoiled. It's been such an adventure. I think having maybe the first year of our ministry in Birmingham in the UK was another amazing time. We were crazy, but baptizing people like crazy too. Finally, wanting to leave and go to a non-English speaking country, that was a real adventure. And there was something magical about that. And now we're actually quite close to Scandinavia. Norway's just north of us, and just east of us is Denmark, and I hope to go there soon. But being in parts of the world that I'd only read about before, and then maybe on the speaking front, speaking to crowds that are mainly Hindu or mainly Buddhist or mainly atheist, and realizing that if we're respectful and we present the truth, but maybe not too much at one time, it can really make a difference. It could plant seeds that lead to some incredible things. So I guess I have a number of events in mind. But yeah, maybe the first time ever in Jerusalem. I've been to Israel more than 20 times. First time ever there was, that was enchanted. That was amazing.
Yeah, I mean, if I remember, you've debated atheists and Hindus and Muslims and who else? Maybe some Jewish
Yeah,
scholars.
some rabbis.
Yeah.
Yeah, the first 10 debates were with people who we would call unbelievers and, Muslim, Jewish, whatever, agnostic. Last year, I had two debates with someone I have much more in common with. He's a Baptist scholar. We had a debate on baptism. And because of COVID, the event was canceled. So we didn't have 900 people in our auditorium. It was just basically the two of us and the camera guy. But he really wanted to share a lot of his material. So it was a 4.5 hour debate.
Wow.
And then the next morning, Sunday, 7:15 a.m., we did a debate on once saved, always saved. That was more of a normal length debate, but
Yeah,
I like doing those maybe once a year.
I think it's remarkable. So again, we're sorry that Vicki couldn't join us today, but for someone, oh, I'm sorry. The next question is for someone who's maybe not familiar with the Churches of Christ or the ICOC. How would you go about trying to describe our family of churches?
My wife would probably have done a better job describing this than me. When I first went to college, like many people, I'd never heard of the Churches of Christ. And of course, at that time, there were no international churches of Christ. I mean, I'd never heard of them, even though I had some family members in there in Texas. So I would say, so I've kind of adopted a heritage. I've been grafted into that restoration movement heritage. But I would say Church of Christ, conservative, can be fundamentalist, not necessarily. A lot of great people. And lately, I think we've seen a better and better relationship among the different flavors of Church of Christ, like between the Church of Christ, International Church of Christ. International Church of Christ, more intense, more evangelistic. And the response I get from most people in the Churches of Christ is that you guys, you've made some mistakes, but you have so much going for you. Please don't put out your fire. Please don't fall to just make a truce with the world or give up your mission. And I appreciate that. It's great to be challenged by people who are kind of, outside our own immediate circle. Is that enough?
It's good. Yeah, thank you very much. Again, I was leading into this question earlier. I know Vicki is not able to be with us today, but you've seen the women's ministry in our family of churches change over the years, undoubtedly. If so, how would you describe that?
Wow. Well, yes. I mean, I first noticed it. So I was baptized in 1977. You, of course, were a very mature Christian at that time. You were one. Moving to Boston, I moved in 1980. There was definitely more of an emphasis on women's ministry, though that meant women ministering to women. Whereas in the Church of Christ, Restoration Movement, it was not historically always this way, but typically that meant women serving men, women doing things that the men didn't necessarily want to do, preparing the communion or whatever, cleaning. Boston was different. There was a huge emphasis on women having careers, being professional, speaking, teaching. So that was different. By the early 90s, it was changing even more. So women were baptizing women. Women were a little bit more prominent up front. And of late, in the last few years, and I think it's overdue, women have been doing even more things. Because my opinion is that the Church of Christ are unnecessarily strict. And one of those things is, in Corinthians, we have women praying, but in most churches, even ICOCs, you don't have women praying on Sunday. It's felt that somehow that will undermine the brothers, which I would love to ask Paul, the apostle, what he thought about that. I doubt very much. He'd say, no, we can use all the help we can get. And so I don't know where this all goes, but we need to be humble, and particularly men in leadership who don't involve women, and if they're married, don't involve their wives, I think are making big mistakes and probably making them over and over again.
That's good wisdom. Well, I'm going to hand it over at this point. And I think we got about another 6 or 7 questions.
Great.
Thank you.
Thanks, Gary.
Thank you. So I know, obviously, you have written 30 books, and we'll talk about that a little bit more as we go. But
Okay.
I know that you definitely are an avid reader. And I think I roped you into reading one book one day, so that was kind of cool. But what would you say are some of your favorite authors and some of your favorite
Now,
books?
hang on, you roped me into, are you talking about Jesus and John Wayne?
No, I was talking about The Color of Law.
Oh, The Color of Law.
I think you
No,
already were reading that one, right?
I stumbled across it. I was reading it, and then you said, you got in touch with me. Let's have an interview with the author. I jumped at it. Jesus and John Wayne, I finished 2 days ago.
Okay.
And I watched the Tokens interview with her, and I really look forward to meeting Kristen Dumais, because that's an amazing book.
Yeah.
Authors, yeah, there are a number. I guess the easy way would be to count. How many books have you read by so and so, and then let that be the answer. But there's so many great writers out there.
Sure.
So maybe C.S. Lewis. That's not original. I wouldn't be the only one. I've read most everything that David Berceau has written, who's an expert in early church.
Yeah.
Yeah, those two come to mind immediately. But I have more. And when I first became a Christian, all the people I admired, like Gary, they read books, and everyone said, "Okay, you got to read this book. These are the books you read in your early months as a Christian or your first year." And so I remember very soon I learned how to order books. This is way before the internet, so I get 4 or 5 books a month, and I'd plow through them. And once I was working for the church on staff, I kind of doubled it, and then eventually tripled it. And I just kept going. And I love to read, but I do. A lot of people say, I want to write something. And I always ask them, do you read? And do you finish what you start? How many books do you read in a typical month? And if that question itself caused them to gag, I just say, well, maybe it's not the right time, because readers read lots of books every month.
Sure. Yeah, I don't know how you find the time to do everything that you do, but it's an inspiration. All right, moving on to the next one. You have stated, I think this was in an interview, it's on your YouTube channel, which we'll talk about in a moment, that most of your books come out of your private study. So I just wanted to see if you can maybe share how that works in terms of a book coming out of your private study. Like, what does that look like, generally speaking?
I don't normally write books from scratch. And it's of course, I'm not a fiction writer, waiting for a brilliant concept, the books tend to crystallize out of things that I've taught. Sometimes it's just things I've studied, but normally it's things I've studied and I've taught them. Often I've taught them many times. So I have a certain way of thinking about them. And that, if it's orderly in the mind, then it can be orderly with the pen or with the laptop. Mm-hmm. So that's how they normally crystallize. And some of them are on topics, like, for example, my book on heaven and hell, or the little book on what happens after we die. But a lot of them are just biblical, like the book on Exodus, or my book on Genesis 1 to 11 that I did with Paul Copen. I tend to think those are the most important things that give people fresh eyes and tools that they can use to read the word.
I think writing is a very courageous endeavor, not in the sense of going out and fighting dragons or whatever, but I think in the sense of putting your ideas out there into the world. And so I just commend you for that, because people can always say, well, that's not how I see it, or this is not. I think it's a very courageous endeavor, so I definitely applaud you for that.
It can rub people the wrong way, but at least before books were digital, you could just wait for your book to die, to be out of print, and then if you had to update it, you could update it. But it's hard now, and doing podcasts and being with video. If you say something that you end up changing your mind on it, which I think is not a bad thing, but you can't really retract that. You can explain it, but it's different than the old days.
Sure.
So maybe that's the only courage that I think it takes. That not just that you may be misquoted, misunderstood, but I may change my mind. And how do I let people know I've changed my mind?
Sure. No, understood. And this is an old one. So I know this is, I think your first book. I'm just holding it so it's not too shiny in the camera.
No,
That was written while you were in London. I think you were the editor. So you basically had various individuals that wrote different chapters in this advanced Christian training booklet. Some of the different authors are, I'm just turning to the page here.
Jeff Walling, John Clayton.
Yep.
Oh, a lot of people.
Pat and Bob and Pat Gemple, Stephen Lisa Johnson, Sam Lang, James Lloyd, and so forth. Al and Gloria Bear, the authors. And so this was, I think, your first book, if I'm not mistaken. And since then, you've written 29 or so other books. You've also traveled to, as I think we mentioned earlier, 126 countries. You mentioned your podcast. You have a YouTube channel and a website. And you're married. I mean, you have a lot going on. And so the question is, what drives you to keep teaching and keep, taking things to the next level?
Well, there's an internal drive because most of the things I read are things I'm interested in. It's not often I'll study a topic that bores me just in case it might interest someone else. I mean, there are times I will take a deep dive, like I had to last year with Messianic Judaism, because I think that's confused so many people. And I thought, okay, I want to study this. I put together a dozen lessons. I try to be careful. But mainly the internal drive is I'm still learning. I mean, I've got all these questions, and I'm afraid that's never going to stop. But then externally, I see the impact it has on people when their confidence in the word is strengthened, or when they find inspiration to, spend more time just studying, applying themselves. You see lives change. Sometimes you see people become Christians directly because of a book, and a lot of the benefits are intangible, but when you see lives changing and you're just even a small part of that, that's very rewarding.
Mm-hmm.
So.
Yeah, and I think I can just say for myself, I know I kind of help out with the books and media ministry here in Detroit, and we have a number of your books, but one of them is compelling evidence for God in the Bible. And we have one brother, his name's Chris. Just to put him out there, but he would come by the book table and he would buy them like they were medication or something to give to people. He would just buy a bunch, more and more of them, which was awesome. And then I know, obviously, we have as a staple that we give to our new members, Till the Nets Are Full, as the evangelistic book, which came from initially was Shining Like Stars. So I definitely understand what you're saying as far as books having an impact, and you can see the impetus to keep writing. And I'm sure the same thing with your podcast and your YouTube channel, just a different media to be able to communicate. So thank you.
Just trying to keep up.
Yeah, you're keeping up.
I don't care how young you are, how old you are, technology moves quickly.
Sure.
It's not just for the older guys like us. It's even the young guys. If they blink, they fall behind. Just an amazing world, isn't it?
Sure. You're not on TikTok yet, though, yeah?
I've heard of it.
Okay. I'm on TikTok. I have 2 followers. So maybe I'll do a YouTube channel about how to get 2 followers on TikTok.
Oh, well, you've certainly established yourself, at least to that level. I have to admit, I don't even know what TikTok is. I know what Facebook is, and a few other things. WeChat, WhatsApp, Instagram.
So one thing that I was wondering, because I mean, obviously as a teacher, I think, when you put out 30 books and you have, visited a lot of places, done devotionals, lessons on everything from marriage to hell to everything in between.
Marriage to hell. Yeah, I know what you mean. Yeah. I'm married to my wife, Vicki, actually.
There was a comma in there. But the question is, how do you remain humble and a learner as you're teaching? And maybe maybe it flows together. Maybe that's what allows you to keep learning and teaching. So, if you can. Well,
the question assumes that I'm humble, which is never a good assumption. To find out, you should ask other people, but not your fans. Because they have it's like in politics. The guy could have egregious faults, blemishes, but if they've already made up their mind, they just don't see them. So I find that feedback helps a lot. I mean, input's what you asked before it's too late, before you do your talk. Feedback, especially, the kisses, profuse may be the kisses of a friend. No, that's not right. I'm getting the proverb backwards here. But the point is, you will be wounded sometimes. And to hear someone will tell it to you straight, that's humbling. That's very humbling. And I think I get plenty of that.
Okay. So basically, you try to put your work out there and try to make sure you get feedback. Is that what I'm understanding? Or
well, feedback tends to come anyway. But yeah, I mean, I look for feedback, but ideally running it by people before it goes out there, getting the input. So, I mean, I like to send, if it's a chapter or if it's an idea, I like to bounce it off a lot of people.
Got it.
And I'm very grateful for them. I thank them in my books. And obviously my wife would be the one because she has a high emotional, intelligence quotient. She's maybe the best, but many people have saved me from, saying the wrong thing or having the wrong tone or being hurtful.
Sure.
And there are times I've had to retract, apologize publicly. Well, anyway.
So I know your background, I believe that's Scotland, correct?
Aye, laddie.
Okay. So I guess my question is, right now you're in Scotland. Is there a specific reason that you're there right now?
Yes. I mean, the reason I'm here right now is that when we had lived in the US 20 years, we were married in 85. We were actually the first wedding in the London church. Okay, that church planning. But around the 20-year, when Vicki and I lived 20 years in the US, she said, at the end of my third green card, that is in a decade, could we consider maybe going back to Europe? Because half of our family lived in Europe. And I said, that's only fair. And so we're getting very close to that. She'll actually become a citizen in a few weeks. On June 1st, she'll become a US citizen.
Awesome.
But it was only fair. So our number one reason here is for family. And we're very close to England. I mean, we're less than 3-hour drive away from 5, 6, maybe 7 family members. And there are others who live in the center. So it was for family. Okay. And there was it puts me closer to Africa, Middle East, Europe, places where I spend a lot of time. So that's nice. My airfare will be less. But to be honest with you, Otoma, we just thought it'd be good for us.
Sure.
Atlanta's a great place, so many great people, but we've been there a long time. And we've seen our church go from kind of little church to a huge church, and something good about, being small.
Mm-hmm.
Good for our faith.
Sure. So you're mobile anyway. I mean, in terms of your ministry, you don't have to be in a specific location. So you can do your ministry from wherever you are.
Like your ministry, my friend, you can do a lot of what you do anywhere in the world, right?
Correct.
It's amazing. But it's a great place to be based. I mean, we happen to love Edinburgh. We think it's one of the most beautiful cities in Europe and probably our favorite city in the UK.
That's awesome. So as we continue, can you please share about one or two people that God has allowed you to impact?
You mean impact like in a good way?
That has allowed you to impact.
What I mean is I've had all kinds of impact on people. Sometimes it's been more neutral, or let's say not as positive. Wow. Of course, I've not thought about, that's a good question. You hesitate sometimes to mention people, by name when you're being recorded and it's online and you don't have permission from them. Well, my friend, I'll just say, being back in the UK, in my case, a lot of the men, some of them are on staff, many are serving as elders, many are very respected older Christians, even grandfathers. These are people that I studied the Bible with. This is our third time living over here. The first 2 times I lived in England, but here in Scotland, so we're back in the UK because that's part of the UK. And they're people I talk to on Zoom or on the phone regularly. People that I've been involved with or have known them since here at the 1980s. And that's a great thing, but also reminds me that I'm becoming quite old. Maybe I didn't answer that question very well. But
I guess I'll rephrase it a little bit. I think you and your wife have impacted a lot of people in terms of being fruitful. I guess I'll put it, that's one aspect, okay? And I guess I'd like to know maybe if you could share about some of the people that you guys have been fruitful with and just the lives that have been changed in that respect.
Yeah, that's a fair question. I mean, there's a couple that we love in Scandinavia that we're able to have an impact on, and it's actually very hard to leave. We left Scandinavia, left Sweden back in the early 90s. It was hard to leave because you invest yourself. When you get to know people, you get to know their families. Mm-hmm. I think there are, in the teaching ministry, I suppose there's some teachers I've been involved with even before they became Christians. But a lot of those men are people who were kind of grafted in, and they're men that I've been working with, partnering up with for the last 20 to 25 years. Mm-hmm. I've got one very close friend in Mexico, for example, Mexico City, which in the ICOC is the largest church outside the US. Mm-hmm. And there are, I don't know, a couple dozen people like that.
No, that's awesome.
Should I share about? I mean, I was reflecting the other day on some people that I had the honor of studying with when I was at Harvard, who became Christians, and then also some people in that time in the U.S. Navy, which is kind of interesting. So there are a lot of people. I wish I were in better contact with everybody. We tend to drift. We tend to take on new challenges and kind of, forget. Family members, a lot of in our family, I was the first one baptized in my family. All together with Vicki and me, we've seen almost 20 people baptized, and most of them are still hanging in there. They're doing okay. They're strong believers. That's encouraging. In the various generations, I guess from the teens up to the 70s. Although that's still young. I have a friend who baptized his father a couple of years ago in Atlanta, and his father just had his 100th birthday celebration last month, which was truly amazing. So maybe we're not so old.
I can imagine what it's like going back to England and being obviously in Scotland and maybe seeing some of the people you knew as teens or in their 20s, and to see them with kids and grandkids now. That must
and teens is correct. Teens and 20s. Now, of course, right in Scotland, we're still not. We moved here in September. It's still against the law to have people in your home. Where it's very strict. So although we have a guest room, we've never had people over for dinner or to stay. It's just against the law. But I think that'll be changing. Hopefully, in the coming, hopefully this year that will change, because we've got loads of neighbors we want to have over, getting to know, like 8 couples. And we want to have them in our home, but it's good. Zoom is good, and intersecting when you're walking the dogs, that's good, but it's not the same as spending an evening together over a meal. So we really look forward to that.
That's awesome. So I know, as I kind of alluded to, you wrote the book Till the Nets Are Full, which is it came after, I guess you modified, Shining Like Stars over time. And my question is, as you look at the new members and really just members in our churches, how would you say we're doing in terms of equipping them, and what can we do better?
Right. And Nets, or originally Shining Like Stars, has gone through many iterations since 1987. Yeah. So this has been around a long time. And you're asking, how do we need to improve in equipping our members? That's pretty easy. From my perspective, we need to teach people Bible. And there's a huge difference between teaching them, here's the church's culture, the church's traditions, and here's one verse that supports that, or here's a list. Just read them. Don't read the verse before or after, because then you'll get confused. Just read the words that sound right. And it's more the proof text method. that doesn't really teach people Bible. We need to teach people to read whole books of the Bible, to know the background and context. So just teaching people what the scriptures say. And that's not the same as saying, well, here are the important teachings and here are the verses we think support that. It's not the same. And really teaching, giving the people the tools to read and to engage issues, sometimes difficult issues, we've not done well at. And even in training leaders, many of them are even church leaders, have had very little training, if any. And I think that hurts us, because if we're going to navigate the world and correctly divide, correctly handle the word of truth, we've got to be better interpreters. And that means we don't always know for sure. We can't be totally certain on everything that we would like to believe in. Some things are very clear. Some things are, I don't know, I'm not so sure about that. This one, 80-20, you know. We got to teach people to think that way and to handle the word more carefully, because this is it's where I want to help the most in my teaching and preaching and training, especially training other people. So I would say just knowledge of the word. I know, I mean, I did a huge a series of Bible tests, kind of a diagnostic a couple of years ago. Most people, and this was for baby Christians all the way up to people who've been Christians 20, 30, 40 years. There were a handful who, you know, really excel, but most people didn't really know very much Bible. I'll just say that. Mm-hmm. But if you want to take that quiz, it's at my website.
Yeah, I'll try to get that and put that in the show notes so people can do like a self-test, if you will. No, that's awesome. So what resources would you maybe recommend to people if they say, you know what, I hear what you're saying, Dr. Jacoby, I really want to get myself or my church or whatever to that level. I know you have obviously a YouTube channel, you have podcasts, you can maybe recommend different books. What would be maybe 2 or 3 things that would be maybe some starters?
Well, one of the most basic ideas is simply read the Bible in a version you've not read before.
Okay.
And maybe not a paraphrase like the Message say. Maybe something that's stricter or just different. That's important. In these days, there's so many resources. The Bible Project is something that I think millions of people have discovered. In our biblical training in the Athens Institute, we have people watch certain episodes. Things like that can be very helpful. If you're listening to this interview and you lead a small group, or maybe you lead a church, most church leaders, they're not on staff. They have other jobs. They're busy. That's one way I like to help. And initially it's for underground churches. But in the iFaith Project, I'm working on 120 sermons from every book of the Bible. I'm getting close to recording number 80. So about 2/3 of the way through. But the way they use it is they watch it as a group. And then they're short, never more than 15 minutes. And then they talk about it.
These are on your YouTube channel?
Yeah, it should be there. iFaith, like IFAITH.
Yep.
That can help people. I mean, yeah, I've written books. Maybe the quick overview of the Bible would be good for people who are new to the Bible. But I'm one of tens of thousands of authors out there. There's so many good things. And I have a document at my website, a document that makes suggestions on over 1,000 books under different headings. And I'll tell you, I didn't write many of them. Obviously, like 1 million new books are published every year in English. So any one person's contribution is going to be minuscule. Mm-hmm. So yeah, they could read my books, but there are a lot of great authors out there who, I'm always pointing people to other sources.
That's awesome.
Podcast, websites, whatever.
Yep. So we're gonna jump into our lightning round. But before that, do you have any new books or projects that you're working on that you'd like to share?
I always have projects. I mean, I start off every year with in January 31 days of a deep dive. This year it was the book of Isaiah, which I never studied Isaiah at that level. Next year it's going to be a study of William Law's A Serious and Devout Call Serious Call to a Devout and Holy Life. We did The Imitation of Christ, Thomas à Kempis, a couple years ago, but I'm working on William Law, for the beginning of 2022. So I always have projects like that, the I Faith series. I wrote a book on Ezekiel, which was going to be published in 2020 with the COVID year. That's been delayed to 2022. I wrote a book last year called Amen, period, collected prayers and hymns for the journey. Now, these are not mainly my prayers. These are other prayers, starting with the Lord's Prayer. But these are prayers you could actually say out loud or adapt slightly, something that as a young Christian I thought, that's cheating. That's just empty to use someone else's words. But of course, if we're praying through the Psalms, we're using someone else's word. If we're singing a hymn, we're using someone else's word. So that's supposed to come out in early June of 2021. So that's close, the book of prayers. And other than that, no book thing right now. I'm trying to take a breather, to be honest.
Well deserved, well deserved. All right, you ready for the lightning round?
Yeah, shock me. Go ahead.
Actually, I'm going to mix this up, and I'm going to have you do the lightning round first, since we're good on time, and then I'll have Gary do the lightning round, which he's just hearing about. But hey, you know what? It's all good. All right. Favorite cuisine?
It would be Asian cuisines. We would typically pick Asian, maybe Indonesian, Singaporean, Malaysian, that part of the world, but we love, Japanese, Korean, Chinese, all kinds. Okay. But I would say,
name a dish.
Like General Tso's chicken or Szechuan, Szechuan pork.
Okay.
To me, the hotter it is, the better. Indonesian, nasi goreng, gado, kari ayam.
Okay. Gary, favorite cuisine?
Chinese.
Okay.
Keep it easy.
All right, Dr. Jacoby, favorite film or series?
We're spoiled, aren't we? In COVID time, I'll admit I've watched more than normal. There's so many great series. The film I've watched the most in my life is Chariots of Fire. Okay. It's a 30-year-old film, but it has a spiritual theme, and I found that very inspiring when I first moved to Europe.
Oh, great music too.
15 times I've seen it. Yeah.
Dun, 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 dun. All right.
That's right.
Mr. Gary, for you, favorite film or series?
Well, I did recently watch Chariots of Fire again. It's always nice to have a little breather in between viewings, but it was great. For me, I love sci-fi stuff. So, anything about going to Mars or whatever, there's plenty of movies about that, and I enjoy that. It's a good one. There was one that I really watched a lot over the last couple of years called Arrival. I won't go into detail, but that was a fun movie. A lot of it about linguistics.
Yeah, I think I saw the previews on that.
Yeah.
Dr. Jacoby, favorite book of the Bible right now, at least?
Yeah, you keep, every time you read through the whole Bible, you rediscover, it's mainly rediscovering what an awesome part of the scripture this is. As a baby Christian, Jeremiah quickly became my favorite. But it's kind of like asking who's your favorite child or grandchild. Little tricky. But right now, I'm in the Psalms. I'm reading through the Septuagint version of the Psalms, and it's one of my favorite books. So I'm going to say Psalms.
Okay, yeah. Awesome. Gary?
Well, I would say Genesis. I've always loved the book of Genesis. I'm going to continue to love it for many, many more years. I've read all Doug's books about it and many, many other people. I love Genesis.
Got a few on
Most
Genesis.
Recently, I read Gordon Ferguson's book, commentary on Romans, The Heart Set Free. That was very good. Refresher on grace. And but I'd always go with Genesis.
Okay. Dr. Jacoby, favorite place to live?
Well, as I said, we lean more towards Europe than the US. So it's a little hard to say favorite place. Not quite sure how to say that, but it would probably be London or Edinburgh.
Okay. So you're living the life right there. You're living the life. Okay. Yeah. Gary?
Well, I've lived a lot of different places, but right here in North Carolina, I never thought I'd end up in North Carolina. I'm a Jersey kid. But like my wife is from here in North Carolina. I love it. We're 2 hours to the beach and 2 hours to the mountains, and we got all kinds of ponds and lakes and everything around us. It's very nice.
You should come to Scotland. We're only half an hour from the beach, and we live on an island. The island called.
I would like that. Yes.
Called Britain.
Yeah.
Seagulls every day.
Dr. Jacoby,
Hmm.
paper Bible or digital?
Well, I'd say paper, analog.
Okay. Gary?
I'm definitely paper Bible. Yeah. I've got the digital copies, but I always gravitate towards grabbing that thing that I can get my hands on and open up and read.
I think that's also a generational thing, because I just recently interviewed Heather and Kent McKean, and they were like, digital.
Yeah.
All right. Apple or Android, Dr. Jacoby?
Apple. I have an Apple and an Android, and I just got the Android this year. I know it's not bad technology, but I've been doing Apple for so long that I find it very challenging. So I'm going to go Apple.
I hear you. Gary?
Yeah. And I'm just the opposite. I've always kind of been Android. I have family members that have tried to convert me to Apple and stuff, but just kind of.
They're both good.
Yes.
Cake, Dr. Jacoby, cake or pie?
Cake or pie? Probably cake.
Okay. Gary?
For me, it's pie, apple pie.
Pie, apple pie, an American right here. Okay. Dr. Jacoby, indoors or outdoors?
Quite know what that means, like sleeping indoors. But like feeling inspired and more connected to God, outdoors for sure.
Okay. Gary?
Same for me. I'd go outdoors anytime. Love it.
All right. And last one, Dr. Jacoby, oceans or mountains?
Well, I love them both, but I would probably have to say oceans.
Okay. And Gary?
Yeah, I would say oceans in the summer and mountains in the winter, but
Okay.
can't have both. So I do love them both. I spend probably equal amount of time at both places, but oceans I love. I grew up loving the ocean. Surfing, swimming, skin diving, scuba diving, all that kind of stuff. So
he's being modest. He didn't say pole vaulting.
That was more in the sky, though.
Right. Yeah, I know.
Yeah. But we wanted to.
We both grew up in New Jersey, so we both grew up with the Atlantic Ocean and being in the shadow of New York City.
Yeah,
pretty much.
Right.
Sure. So as we close it out, I wanted to just get a chance to have some words of encouragement for your years of ministry. And Gary's going to start out, and then I'll share a few words.
Okay. Well, Doug, I just can't say enough how enjoyable it is to be here in this format with you. I guess the thing that goes through my mind is, we went to university together at Duke. You were in my wedding. After my wedding, I went to Abilene to get a master's in Bible, and you went to Boston. And when I graduated, I was scratching my head like, what am I going to do? And you were really one of the primary people that influenced me to come up to Boston. And I'm so glad I did. That was a real life changer, a real game changer. And then, again, later in life, in 2003, when my oldest son passed away at the University of Georgia, you were right there. And you were invaluable support, just more than I could ever express the way that you helped us at that time. So I guess the thing I think about you, Doug, is I know a lot of people look at you as an author, a scholar, a preacher, and everything, but I look at you as a friend. You're a real friend. You don't just talk the talk. You walk the walk, and it's a great privilege to have this relationship with you.
Thank you, Gary. You've been nothing but encouraging since we've met, from those early years all the way to the present. And I'm happy that we're able to connect, even if it's just online, like right now.
Yeah, it's great.
Please give my love to your wife, to Gail, from Vicki and me both. Thank you for sharing those meaningful words.
Yeah.
Yeah, I know you mostly through your books and for connecting from time to time on different, whether it's podcast or what have you. But I know you did visit Detroit many years ago. I don't know if you recall, Brother Roy Chow had invited you.
Oh, yeah, sure.
Okay. And Tom Wilson says you have two brains because you're so smart. But the thing that, and I think that's awesome. I think we definitely are going to have people who are very gifted intellectually, but what I appreciate about you is that you put what you've learned into practice. And, you know, you really have helped a lot of people become Christians, which I think is very admirable. And as Gary mentioned, you're known throughout the world as someone who, you know, knows and teaches the Bible, but there's a lot more to it than that. You're not just a teacher, because that can very easily become pharisaical, but you also try to make sure, as you mentioned, you get input from others when you're writing. You bounce things off of your wife to kind of get her input. Maybe she's your ideal, you know, reader for some of your books. So I appreciate your humility, you know, in that sense. What I love about your books, and like I said, and I've shared this with Michael Burns, is I think it takes a lot of courage to write. Because as soon as you put it on paper, you've made a statement, and people can come back and say, you said it, this is what you know. And so I think it's very courageous. I think it's a very courageous thing to write, even though people may not think like, you know, you're in a room or laptop or whatever. But I think it's a very courageous thing to write. And I appreciate what you've done, not just with one book, but with more than 30 books. You've been to multiple countries and just poured yourself out year after year. And it definitely is appreciated. I think in 2003, when our churches went through a lot, you know, you pivoted and said, okay, we need to still figure something out. And that's when, you know, as one door was closed, so to speak, another was opened, and, you know, your ministry, you know, took off. So I just want to say, you know, thank you just for your ministry, for everything that you've done and continue to do. I'm glad you're getting time with family, and I will definitely include the information you noted in the show notes. And I just want to say thank you for your time.
Thank you for your work and your initiative. And I look forward to our third interview very soon.
Yes. Thanks again.
Amen. Thank you, Doug.